Welcome to this lecture of political science, whereby we are going to understand postmodernism, right? Postmodernism. The word of postmodernism. The word of postmodernism. What the word signifies. What the word signifies. Post and modernism. What is modernism? It is Modernism is ideology of enlightenment. Ideology of enlightenment is modernism. What is ideology of enlightenment? It is rationality, it is science, right? Postmodernism. That is beyond the ideology of enlightenment, beyond rationality and beyond science. Thinking beyond ideology of enlightenment, that is rationality and science. Postmodernism. Thinking beyond modernism. Thinking beyond modernism. Right? What is postmodernism? To write in a cliched way, to start your answers in a cliched way, what you write, it is an intellectual reaction against certain destructive aspect of modernity. Or you can write, it is an epistemological overturning of aspects of modernity. So keywords like this will make your answers really sexy, right? Intellectual reaction against certain destructive aspects of modernity. In essence, this is postmodernism. This is thinking beyond modern ideology, thinking beyond rationality and beyond science. Right. The prominent thinker in postmodernisms are Lyotard, Michel Foucault, and Jacques Derrida. Jacques Derrida. Right. All French people. And postmodernism is an ideology which emerged in post World War II France. Right? It is an ideology of France, which it is an ideology which emerged out of France. It is not ideology of France per se, but it is an ideology which emerged out of France. Right? Postmodernism, thinking beyond ideology of modernism, ideology of enlightenment, ideology of rationality, and ideology of science. Postmodernism. To understand postmodernism, we'll start with thinking of Lyotard. Thinking of Lyotard, right? Lyotard is the first person to coin this term, postmodernism. But he is not first person to build this idea. It was Nietzsche. Nietzsche is father of postmodernism, but postmodernism as a term was coined by Lyotard. In his book Postmodern Condition. In his book Postmodern Condition, Lyotard coins this term postmodernism. What do he say postmodern condition as? What, for according to him, what is postmodern condition? It is it is incredibility, incredibility towards meta narratives. Incredibility towards meta narratives. What is incredibility? It is skepticism. It is disbelief. It is sus. We are seeing meta narratives through a sus lens. We are thinking meta narratives are sus, right? Skepticism, disbelief, sus, right? Meta narratives is the imposter, right? Incredibility towards narratives, skepticism, disbelief towards meta narrative, critical analysis of meta narratives, right? Meta narratives is what? Meta narratives is what? It is a grand theory. It is a grand theory. It is a narrative about narrative. It is story about story, right? Story about story. To explain this, I will give you example of knowledge systems, religions, scientific theories. These are all meta narratives according to postmodern thinkers, right? Knowledge systems, religions, and theories. What do I mean by knowledge system, religion, and theories? How they are meta narratives. How knowledge systems are meta narratives, how religions are meta narratives, how theories are meta narratives, right? So let's assume the knowledge system of homeopathy. Homeopathy is a knowledge system. Homeopathy is a system of medicine of whose meta narrative is placebo, right? I'll give you one more example. Religion, right? I'll give two examples of major religions: Hinduism and Islam. What is meta narrative of Hinduism? There is uh, let's Hinduism is quite diverse. Still, we'll stick to a one meta narrative of Hinduism, which is Sanatana Dharma. And what is meta narrative of Islam? It is Quran. Similar with the theories, I will give one example of the theory, which is Newton's three laws of motion. Right? Newton's three laws of motion is a narrative about everything that goes on around us. It is narrative about mechanics. Right? Hinduism is a narrative which is based on narrative of Sanatana Dharma. Islam is a narrative which is based on meta narrative of Quran or Allah. Homeopathy is a meta narrative. It is a narrative which is based on meta narrative of placebo. Right? Explanation of something is given by meta narrative. Why you should follow Hinduism? Because it is Sanatana Dharma. Why you should follow Islam? Because it follows words of God which is written in Quran. Quran is meta narrative for Islam. Right? There is this narrative and there is going to be a meta narrative for that. In contemporary world, I will give you example of something like uh, cricket bats or football shoes or I don't know, a type of jeans, right? Jeans, let's assume, is a narrative, right? Jeans, let's assume, is a narrative, and we are buying jeans, we are acquiring them, then the meta narrative for that will be consumerism. Do you understand? Right? So there is going to be a narrative and there is going to be a meta narrative which explains the narrative. Explanation of a narrative is meta narrative. Okay. Oh, so this is meta narrative. Oh. And what is postmodern condition? It is disbelief towards such meta narratives. Disbeliefs towards such knowledge system, such religions, such theories which limit your thinking. Incredulity towards meta-narratives, that is, skepticism, disbelief towards knowledge system and theories, which shape your world. It is a narrative about narrative, right? So, incredulity towards meta-narrative means what? It is disbelief. It is disbelief. Now, now meta-narrative. Meta-narrative. Okay. There are multiple explanations for this term meta-narrative. I gave you one or two explanations whereby meta-narrative means narrative about narratives. It is story about story. It is knowledge system or theories, right? But Lyotard says that there can be multiple narratives in a society. Narratives in a society, right? The dominant one of all this will gain wider acceptability. Dominant narrative will gain acceptability, right? Right now, meta narrative in Indian political discourse, meta narrative in Indian political economy is direct benefit transfer, right? This is the narrative which is working, right? Direct benefit transfer, I mean, Ladli Bahin Yojana, Pyari Behna Yojana, and recently in Bihar election there was Mahila Rozgar Yojana, right? This is the meta narrative which seems to be working in Indian society right now. So meta narrative of Indian political economy currently is direct benefit transfer. In 2 or 3 years prior, it was Hindutva. Hindutva was the meta narrative which was working in Indian political economy, Indian political discourse, right? But but right now, dominant narrative is direct benefit transfer. 2 or 3 years prior, it was Hindutva. Does it mean does it mean Hindutva or direct benefit transfer are the only narratives which are working right now? No, right? Secularism is another such narrative. Reservation is another such narratives. Regionalism is another such narrative, right? So to understand Indian political economy, Indian polity more, Indian politics more, you cannot be limited to direct benefit transfer as meta narrative. You cannot be limited to Hindutva, secularism, reservation, or regionalism. You have to understand all of these together to understand narrative or meta narrative, that is Indian political system or Indian politics, right? So there is not one narrative which you should understand. You should understand all narratives to understand understand diversity of thought, diversity of diversity of uh, concept, diversity of ideas and all that, right? This is what meta narrative is all about. Multiple perspective in a society, thinking from multiple perspective to understand a better to understand system in a better way. What it assumes, what meta narrative assumes, that we are thinking we are thinking in we are thinking on a subject with only one perspective, right? Right. Suppose this is this is Hindutva. I will make a system for it. Hindutva, and I correlate Hindutva with election results. Election results. Right. Now, is Hindutva the only factor? Is Hindutva the only factor which which affect election results? No. If I think that Hindutva is the only narrative which affect election results, then I am biased and I am thinking that Hindutva is a meta narrative. But it is simply not true, right? When I add in this system secularism, when I add in this system caste, when I add in this system Mahila factor, when I add all these factors in considering what will be the result of election, I will have a better understanding. My understanding will be better, and my biases about the Indian election system will be lowered. So this is what incredulity towards meta narratives mean, right? Disbelief towards grand theories and understanding a phenomena through multiple point of views. This is what, in essence, incredulity towards meta narratives mean. Disbelief towards a knowledge system and understanding a phenomena from multiple perspectives. Right? Sticking to this example only, I will explain you one more time. Right? If I believe in a meta narrative of Hindutva, then my biases are there and my understanding is very low. My understanding is not that nuanced about election results or Indian political system. So I am limited to one meta narrative. This should not be the case. I should I should understand election results through secularism, through caste, through Mahila factor, through youth factor, through poverty factor. All these meta narratives I should take into account. I should not be limited to one dominant idea, which is what incredulity towards meta narrative mean. Right? I hope you understood this. Incredulity towards meta narrative mean not sticking to one idea, one grand theory, but understanding a phenomena through multiple narratives, multiple ideas. By understanding a phenomena through multiple ideas, you will get your biases down and your understanding about the world around you will be in increasing way. Right. So this is what Lyotard want to say. Do not be limited to one system of knowledge. Try to understand the phenomena through multiple perspectives. Through multiple perspectives. Right. To explain this, to explain this diversity of thought more, to explain the idea of analyzing a phenomena through multiple narratives, there is this one quote of Lyotard whereby he says that there is there is not one universe. Every person has its own universe and truth. Lyotard. Right? There is not one universe. Every person has its own universe and truth. There is not only one one school of thought, one knowledge system which is dominant. There can be dominant knowledge system, but one cannot be truth all the time. There is not one universe, but every person has their own universe and own truth, right? If you ask a Jew about Hitler, he will say one thing. If you ask a German about Hitler, he will say another thing. And if you ask someone who is from Gaza, who is being suppressed by these Jews, he will say another thing, right? So the truths of all these persons are different, right? This is what Lyotard want to say. Do not be limited to one truth. Try to understand as many point of view as possible so that your idea about the world around you will be clearer. You will understand the world around you in a better way, right? Okay. So incredibility towards meta narrative, disbelief towards meta narrative, and not understanding phenomena only through one point of view, but understanding phenomena through multiple narratives, multiple point of views. This is what incredulity towards meta-narrative mean. This is what postmodern condition wants to say, right? Okay. Then Lyotard says, Lyotard says that to say to understand more about meta-narratives, he says this is one quote whereby he says that grand nature, grand nature tend to cover up differences. It is an attempt to suppress heterogeneity of mankind. Lyotard, in his book, in his book, Postmodern Condition, a report on knowledge. What do Lyotard mean by this quote? Whereby grand nature tend to cover up differences, it is an attempt to suppress heterogeneity of mankind. It again means the same thing. Whereby grand theories explaining the phenomena will limit your thinking, and it should not be that way. The phenomena, the event should be analyzed through multiple POVs so that your understanding will be better. Right? This quote, this quote, we are going to apply as Lyotard applied in his book Postmodern Condition to challenge the meta narrative of modernity, whereby not Rousseau, but Lyotard challenged meta narrative of modernity. To challenge meta narrative of modernity, what does he say? He says that he says that meta narrative of modernity assumes that number one, man is rational. Number two, that society moves towards progress. Right? That means that means society moves in a linear direction or evolutionary direction. For Lyotard, these two assumptions, these two features these two features are not correct. Are not correct. What do Lyotard mean by man is rational? That you are thinking about things rationally. You are thinking about the issues with keeping the views of society in your mind. You don't want to go beyond the core ideas of society, right? And society moves towards progress or linear direction or evolutionary direction. This we are going to understand by understanding liberalism and Marxism, right? This we'll understand. What do Lyotard mean by society moves towards progress or in linear direction? We'll understand by understanding liberalism and Marxism, right? Okay. So society move towards progress. This is a meta-narrative of modernity. Modernity assumes that society moves towards progress, right? To explain this, I will start with this statement whereby I'll say that meta-narrative provides a lens through which you understand truth, right? So let's assume this is a lens, and these are multiple truths which are coming in this lens, right? This lens will filter out all the other truths which are not according to your inherent biases, and only one truth will come out of this, right? So meta narrative or narrative will keep your thinking limited. When your thinking is limited, then you tend to ignore plurality of thought. You tend to be homogenizing. You universalize ideas, and you are totalitarian about ideas. You think your truth is the most important truth, right? Due to all these things, due to denial of plurality, due to centralizing nature, due to homogenizing, due to universalization of ideas, and totalitarian views, the meta narrative or grand theory, what does it do? It is anti-democratic because it limits you to one system of thought. It is anti-democratic. As it is anti-democratic, it it does not pay heed to plurality. It is it is not diversity. It is against freedom, and it does not give choice. Right? Meta narrative provides a lens through which you understand the truth. When you understand truth from only one point of view, what happens is that you try to neglect all other point of views about the truth. So you are totalitarian in that sense. You are anti-democratic in that sense, whereby you actively reject all other ideas which do not fall in your idea of truth, right? So meta narrative, and right, meta narrative provides a lens through which you understand the truth. And just before this I said that I will explain you society move towards progress. This was the linking statement to our mm, next concept, that meta narrative limits your thinking. Meta narrative limits your thinking to a particular school of thought. This is what the main criticism which Lyotard gives of enlightenment, right? How Lyotard's challenge to enlightenment, right? Whereby he says that meta-narrative provides a lens through which you limit your understanding, you understand the truth, right? Lyotard's challenge to enlightenment. Which two philosophies came out of enlightenment? First one is liberalism, and second is Marxism, right? What are the primary objective of liberalism? Freedom, sorry, not freedom, but liberty. Then, what does liberalism try to offer? It offers laissez-faire economy, it offers order, it offers law. What does Marxism offer? It offers freedom from basic necessities, right? It offers communism, it offers freedom from alienation. So, the meta narratives which came out of enlightenment, where one was liberalism, other was Marxism, right? They offered they offered freedom, emancipation, all those things. But but did they succeed? No. Neither liberalism succeeded, neither Marxism nor Marxism succeeded. Why? Because they had a linear view of history. They had an evolutionary view of history. This is what Lyotard wants to say by this. That society moves, the meta-narrative of modernity assumes that society moves towards progress. This is linear or evolutionary view of meta-narrative of modernity, right? Whereby liberalism assumes that society will move towards progress. Society will move towards more capital, more law, more order. Marxism assumes that society will move towards revolution, society will move towards communism. But both of them failed because they had a linear or evolutionary view of history. They thought they thought of history through a particular lens, right? Both of them failed. Both of these meta narratives failed because they had a standard linear view of history. This is what Lyotard criticizes, right? So, so what Lyotard says that reject all this, reject foundationalism in essential ideas, reject foundationalism in ideas which limit your thinking, right? So, what does Lyotard say? Incredulity towards meta narratives. These meta narratives failed in their primary goals of emancipation. These meta narratives failed their goal of in their goal of freedom. That is why Lyotard says that we should have disbelief towards meta narratives. We should have skepticism towards meta narratives. Right? What this incredulity towards meta narratives, skepticism toward meta narratives means, it means rejection of foundationalism, right? Rejection of foundationalism, whereby Lyotard says that There is no essential knowledge. There is no essential knowledge. Right? There is no essential knowledge because all knowledge system will be challenged at some point of time. Like liberalism as a knowledge system did not get to his goal. Marxism as a knowledge system did not get to his goal. If such foundationalism is in your thought, then you will be limited in your action, in your thinking. So reject such foundational ideas, right? Rejection of essential knowledge, for which Lyotard says that reject science, reject religion. By limiting yourself to science or religion, you will limit your spectrum of thought to a bare minimum. You will be very much limited in your spectrum of thought. So reject foundational ideas, reject foundational knowledge. Right? Okay. Then he gives some features of meta narratives. Some features of meta narratives. First feature was first feature was that meta narrative tries to explain history by connecting it to one school of thought, right? Meta narratives tries to explain history by connecting it to one school of thought. I'll give you example of Marxism. What does Marxism do? Marxism says that is revolution is inevitable. There revolution is going to happen regardless of anything. Why? Because progressive class in the history has won till now, and Marx believes that it will win this time as well. Right? So he limits history true to that school of thought. Then he says that history moved because dialectical materialism. History moves because of dialectical materialism. History is movement of economic ideas. Right? Features of meta narratives. First feature is meta narratives tries to explain history by connecting it to one school of thought. It means it means that history is seen as history is seen through only one point of view. Whereby what does Marx say? History is history movement of resources. History is dialectics between materials. Right? This is one school of thought. That history is movement of materials. History is uh, dialectic between materials. Right? Then then history of Indian national movement. Then history of Indian national movement. Right? Meta narratives tries to explain history by connecting it to one school of thought. Indian national movement is seen as history of Indian National Congress. Right? These are features of meta narratives. This is not prescription for meta narratives. Right? We are not we are not seeing what should we do. We are seeing what are features of meta narratives. Right? We should not look in only one direction when we are trying to understand the phenomena. But what is Lyotard is trying to say is that how meta narrative is, right? Then he says that meta-narrative is is right. Meta-narrative is a cultural narrative. Meta-narrative is a cultural narrative whereby cultural narrative will explain your way of thinking, events, and phenomena and experiences. Right? Cultural narrative of Ramayana will will impact your thinking, events in your life, phenomena in your life, and experiences of your life. Your ethics, morality is somewhere somewhat shaped by this cultural narrative, which a meta narrative, which is Ramayana. Right? The third feature of meta narrative, it is that meta narrative is a story about story. Right? It is a conceptual model to explain stories. Right? And the last feature is, and the last feature is, it it is a master idea which has social legitimacy to explain events in your life. Right? So this was Lyotard. I hope you understood Lyotard. I try to explain Lyotard in quite a detail, but I hope you understood him. And I'll start with Nietzsche. I'll start with Foucault. I'll start with post-colonialism on the next lecture. I hope you understood Lyotard. I hope this was helpful. I'll see you in the next lecture.